Questionable. Hey, it worked. No, wait. Yeah. um, yeah, it's gonna be delayed. It's because I don't have good computer, don't have good internet. Spooky. Sorry, but I am so new to this. I don't know what I'm doing and stuff. But hopefully we're gonna try and read stuff soon. Let's just... Dude, I want to learn how to cook turnover pastry. I want to learn how to cook pastry. That'd be cool. I support you in your effort of doing that. I really feel like... I don't know. Honestly, I might just close. I might just close YouTube and start reading or something. I guess because if you want me to start reading, I could do that. It would be better for my computer, too. Is it still working? I hope that it's still working is the thing I need. Oh no, it's using the wrong mic. Oh no, now it's got no audio. Wait. Am I just really quiet now? Grr. Wonder when people are gonna hop on. If you do this regularly / daily, people will hop on. Yes, I really hope that people... I mean, that's the whole point of reading books chapter after chapter, because they'll be able to follow along. Sorry about that. Post your thing to places, invite people, say you're going live. That's why I brought you here. You're the person. um well, I mean, I guess no. I'm so sorry about messing with my mic. Well, I suggest we start reading them. The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. A Grotesque Romance by author of War of the Worlds and The Time Machine, etc. There's a table of contents, pages that are blank. Okay. Let me end that. So, since I suppose things are going okay enough that I'm able. Yay, streaming, right? With mods and shit. Dedicated Discord for fans. Reading. I am so nervous. The stranger came early February, one wintry day, through a biting wind and a driving snow, the last snowfall of the year, over the down, walking, as it seemed, from Bramblehurst railway station, and carrying a little black portmanteau in his thickly gloved hand. Anthony. Oh, hi! Hello, Anthony H. It is wonderful to see you. He was wrapped up from head to foot, and the brim of his soft felt hat hid every inch of his face but the shiny tip of his nose. The snow had piled itself against his shoulders and chest, and added a white crest to the burden he carried. He staggered into the coach and horses, more dead than alive did seem, and flung his portmanteau down. "A fire!" he cried. "In the name of human charity! A room and a fire!" He stamped and shook the snow from himself. "It's me. Yes, it is you. I know who you are. Your friend." Coach and Horses might be the name of the inn. I never really knew that. It always confused me. In the bar, and followed Miss Hall. Oh. He stamped and shook the snow from off himself in the bar, and followed Miss Hall into her guest parlour to strike his bargain. And with that much introduction, that and a ready acquaintance to terms, and a couple of souvenirs flung upon the table, he took up his quarter in the inn. Miss Hall lit the fire and left him there while she went to prepare. I'm bad with my intonation or flow or whatever it is. Miss Hall lit the fire and left him there while she went to prepare a meal with her own hands. A guest to stop at Epping in the winter was an unheard of piece of luck, let alone a guest who was no haggler. She was resolved to show herself worthy of her good fortune. As soon as the bacon was well under way, and Milly, her lymphatic aid, had brisked up a bit of deftly chosen expressions of contempt, she carried the cloth and plates and glasses into the parlour, and began to lay them with the utmost éclat. I should look up that word, but I'm not going to right now. Although the fire was burning up briskly, she was surprised to see that her visitor still wore his hat and coat, standing with his back to her, and staring out of the window at the falling snow in the yard. His gloved hands were clasped behind him, and he seemed to be lost in thought. She noticed that the melted snow that had sprinkled his shoulders had dropped upon her carpet. "Can I take your hat and coat, sir?" she said, "and give them a good dry in the kitchen?" "No," he said, without turning. She was sure she had quite heard him, and was not sure she had heard him, and was about to repeat her question. He turned his head and looked over his shoulder. "I prefer to keep them on," he said with emphasis, and she noticed that he wore big blue spectacles with side lights, and had a bushy side whisker over his coat collar that completely hid his cheeks and face. Very well, sir, she said. As you like. In a bit the room will be warmer. He made no answer, and he had turned his face away from her again. And Miss Hall, feeling that her conversational advances were ill-timed, laid the rest of the table things in quick staccato and whisked out of the room. When she returned he was still standing there, like a man of stone, his back hunched and his collar turned up, his dripping hat brim turned down, hiding his face and ears completely. She put down the eggs and bacon with considerable emphasis, and called rather than said to him, "Your lunch is served, sir." "Thank you," he said at the same time, and did not stir until she was closing the door. Then he swung round and approached the table with a certain eager quickness. As she went behind the bar in the kitchen, she heard a sound, repeated at regular intervals. Chirk, 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 it went, and the sound of a spoon being rapidly whisked round a basin. "That girl," she said. "There, I clean forgot it. It's her being so long." And while she herself finished mixing the mustard, she gave Milly a few verbal stabs for her excessive slowness. And she had cooked the ham and eggs, laid the table, and done everything, while Milly, help indeed, had only succeeded in delaying the mustard. And him a new guest, and wanting to stay. Then she filled the mustard pot, putting it with a certain staleness upon a golden black tea tray, carried it into the parlour. She rapped and entered promptly. As she did so her visitor moved quickly, so that she got but a glimpse of the white object disappearing behind the table. It would seem he was picking something from the floor. She rapped down the mustard pot on the table, and then she noticed the overcoat and the hat had been taken off and put over a chair in front of the fire, and a pair of wet boots threatened to rust her steel fender. She went to these things resolutely. "I suppose I may have them to dry now," she said in a voice that brokered no denial. "Leave the hat," said her visitor, in a muffled voice, and turning, she saw he had raised his head and was sitting and looking at her. For a moment she stood gaping at him too, surprised to speak. He had a white cloth, it was a serviette he had brought with him, over the lower part of his face, so that his mouth and jaws were completely hidden, and that was the reason of his muffled voice. But it was not that which startled Miss Hall. It was the fact that all of his forehead above his blue glasses were covered by a white bandage, and that another covered his ears, leaving not a scrap of his face exposed, except for only his pink, peaked nose. It was bright pink and shiny, just as it had been at first. He wore a dark brown velvet jacket, with a high black linen collar turned up about his neck, the thick black hair escaping as it could below, and between the crossed bandages, projected in curious tails and horns, giving him the strangest appearance conceivable. This muffled and bandaged head was so unlike what she had anticipated, that for a moment she was rigid. He did not remove the serviette, but he remained holding it, as she saw now, with a brown-gloved hand, and regarding her with his inscrutable blue glasses. "Leave the hat," he said, speaking very distinctly through the white cloth. Her nerves began to recover from the shock they had received. She placed the hat on the chair again by the fire. "I didn't know, sir," she began, "that—" and stopped, embarrassed. "Thank you," he said drily, glancing from her to the door, and then at her again. "I'll have them nicely dried, sir, at once," she said, and carried his clothes out of the room. She glanced at his white-swathed head and blue goggles again as she was going out of the door, but his napkin was still in front of his face. She shivered a little as she closed the door behind her, and her face was an eloquent of her surprise and perplexity. "I never," she whispered. "There." She went quite softly to the kitchen, and was too preoccupied to ask Milly what she was messing about with now. When she got there, see what Milly was messing about with now, when she got there. The visitor sat and listened to her retreating feet. He glanced inquiringly at the window before he removed his serviette and resumed his meal. He took a mouthful, glanced suspiciously at the window, and took another mouthful, and rose, and taking the serviette in his hand, walked across the room and pulled the blind down to the top of the white muslin that obscured the lower panes. This left the room in a twilight. This done, he had returned with an easier air to the table and his meal. The poor soul had an accident, or an operation or something, said Miss Hall. What a turn them bandages did give me, to be sure. She put on some more coal, unfolded the clothes horse, and extended the traveller's coat upon. And the goggles! Why, he looked more like a divin' helmet than a human man. She hung his muffler on the corner of the horse, and holding that handkerchief over his mouth all the time, talking through it. Perhaps his mouth was hurt too. Maybe. She turned round, as one who suddenly remembers. Bless my soul alive, she said, going off on a tangent. Ain't you done with them taters yet, Milly? When Miss Hall went to clear away the stranger's lunch, her idea that his mouth must have been cut or disfigured in the accident. She supposed him to have suffered what was confirmed, for he was smoking a pipe, and all the time she was in the room he never loosened the silk muffler that he had wrapped around the lower part of his face to put to the mouthpiece to his lips. Yet it was not forgetfulness, for she saw he glanced at at Yet it was not forgetfulness, for she saw he glanced at it as it smoldered out. He sat in the corner with his back to the window, blind, and spoke now, having eaten and drunk and being comfortably warmed through with less aggressive brevity than before. The reflection of the fire lent a kind red animation to the big spectacles they had lacked hitherto. I have some luggage, he said, at Bramblehurst station, and he asked her how he could have it sent. He bowed his bandaged head quite politely in acknowledgment of her explanation. To-morrow, he said. There is no speedier delivery, and seemed quite disappointed when she answered, no. Was she quite sure? No, a man with a trap who would go over. Miss Hall, nothing loath, answered his question and developed a conversation. It's a steep road by down, sir, she had answered to the question about a trap, and then, snatching at an opening, said, It was there a carriage was upsettled a year ago or more. A gentleman killed beside his coachman. Accidents, sir, happen in a moment, don't they? But the visitor was not drawn so easily. They do, he said, through his muffler, eyeing her quietly through his impenetrable glasses. But they take long enough to get well, sir, don't they? There was my sister's son, Tom, just cut his arm with a scythe, trembled on it, and the 'ayfield, and bless me, he was 3 months tied up, sir. You'd hardly believe it. It's regular given me a dread of a scythe, sir. I can quite understand that, said the visitor. He was afraid one time that he'd have to have an operation. He was that bad, sir. The visitor laughed abruptly, a bark of a laugh, that he seemed to bite and kill in his mouth. Was he said. He was, sir, and it's no laughin' matter to them as had doin' for him, as I had my sister, bein' took up with her little ones and so much. There were bandages to do, sir, and bandages to undo, so that if I make myself so bold as to say it, sir, will you get me some matches? Said the visitor quite abruptly. My pipe is out. Miss Hall was pulled up suddenly, and it was certainly rude of him after telling him all she had done. She gasped at him for a moment, and then remembered the 2 souvenirs. She went for the matches. "Thanks," he said concisely as she put them down, and turned his shoulder upon her and stared out the window again. It was altogether too discouraging. Evidently he was sensitive on the topic of operations and bandages. She did not make so bold as to say, however, after all. But his snubbing way had irritated her, and Milly had a hot time of it after that noon. The visitor remained in the parlor until 4 o'clock, without giving the ghost of an excuse for an intrusion. For the most part, he was quite still during the time. It would seem that he sat in the growing darkness, smoking in the firelight, perhaps dozing. Once or twice a curious listener might have heard him at the coals, and for the space of 5 minutes he was audible pacing the room. He seemed to be talking to himself, and then the armchair creaked as he sat down again. And then that was the first chapter. Yay! And I stopped blinking at some point. But that's okay. What was that one called? That chapter was called The Strange Man's Arrival. And I did not say the name of the chapter before I started, but that's okay. Yay! Your voice is lovely. Thank you. That means a whole bunch to me. Especially if I'm going to be doing reading streams. Then it would be good to have a lovely voice. Yeah. Well, that is very exciting. I hope to do this again soon. I don't know when exactly, but thank you so much everybody for watching. And if you've watched the video all the way to the end, yay, thanks. And I hope y'all have a wonderful